Hello, everyone. Welcome into today's webinar. We're really glad to have you here. Thank you for taking the time, whether you're at the office or at home. We appreciate you being here through these difficult and uncertain times. We know there's a lot going on. In fact, our team is working remotely today. Most of us are working from home and trying to take care of all of our clients amid the coronavirus outbreak. So we really appreciate you being here. This topic is actually really relevant to what's going on in the world today. Bo Harris, the president of Harris Federal Employee Law Firm, is going to be talking with you and going over how to protect your financial future with federal disability retirement. And hopefully this is going to show you how utilizing this benefit can really help you build a foundation for a better retirement and a better future. We're going to have some teammates here on the webinar with us that are here to answer questions. You can see the chat box open here. Feel free to ask questions. If it's something that we can't answer over chat because it's either really specific to your case or a question that we just can't answer right now, feel free to give us a call at 877-226-2723. And we'll schedule a consultation with you. It's completely free and really get you the information you need. But without further ado, let's get into this and have Bo Harris lead us through this talk. Thank you.
Hey everyone, welcome into this webinar. My name is Bo Harris with Harris Federal Law Firm. I'm a chartered federal employee benefit consultant and appreciate you being in here today. Today we're going to be talking about protecting your financial future with disability retirement. This is a big topic, really important because a lot of people have questions and are concerned about what their financial future looks like in general. And then if you throw in the complications of a medical condition that prevents you from performing your job any longer, and potentially you have the right to file for federal disability retirement, what does all that look like? So there are ways to strategize and maximize that retirement and that future. And today we're going to talk about how to protect that. And we're going to talk about what some of these things mean and try to make it simple as possible. A quick disclaimer before we get going. This presentation is intended to be informational only. It's not intended to be legal advice. We want it to be as informative as possible, but it's just for those reasons, just for information. One other thing that I want to point out before we get started is that we have team members here ready to answer questions that you have during this presentation. So if something pops up as a question that you want to ask, feel free to use the platform that you're in right now to ask that question, and we'll have somebody available to answer that for you. If for some reason those questions don't get answers before this presentation is over, feel free to contact our offices at any time. We would be honored and more than happy to schedule some one-on-one time with you for a free consultation. So without further ado, let's get started here. So moving into this today's topic, again, protecting your financial future with federal disability retirement. Retirement is a complicated thing, and it's big, and it's hard to understand. But one of the things that you need to know is what is your current plan. We think it's important for all federal employees to, at least on an annual basis, understand what their plan is, or at least what direction they're heading, and so they can make sound decisions. But essentially, FERS and CSRS, that's your retirement plan, Federal Employee Retirement System, or CSRS, Civil Service Retirement System. Almost all federal employees nowadays that are still employed are FERS employees. A second component to your retirement plan would be the Thrift Savings Plan, or TSP. Hopefully you've taken advantage of this because there's some serious advantages here while you're employed. And one of those is that your employment agency will match contributions up to a certain limit. So a thrift savings plan is essentially the government's form of a 401k plan. You also have entitlement to life insurance and health insurance group options, which are great or can be great. You need to make sure, obviously, that they are still affordable and that they're the right kind of insurance that you need, but they are there for you as a federal employee, which is great. You might have other plans, like maybe other income streams that you're planning on using or cashing in when you're in retirement. So combining all of these different things and understanding that is how you begin to look at your current plan. When you start knowing what that plan is, then you start thinking to yourself, will I make it? Will I make it all the way across the finish line? A lot of federal employees have physically difficult jobs, and that's a very real question that people ask themselves is, will I actually make it to retirement age? Most people do have a plan, or at least they have some idea of what that will look like. But again, the thing that we're talking about is what if something happens? And what if you actually don't make it there? What if you have a workplace injury or an unexpected medical condition that arises that might not be work-related, but it creates the inability to work, to continue your job? And then what if you tell your agency about that, or your agency says, we're unable to accommodate you any longer? You need to understand what a situation like that could entail. Most people do not know what their options would be after something like this happened. And that's kind of what we're talking about, is how you're protecting that financial future. Most people definitely do not know about how this will affect their plans for retirement. Not only what they'll do in the short term of when something like this happens, but also how that will affect what they had hoped for or planned for in regards to the retirement plan. One of the things I want to do is provide a couple example employees that we can walk through, and it gives us a better view into what a realistic situation could be like for a federal employee. So this person is named John. This is an example federal employee who is a letter carrier with the USPS. Some facts about John is that he's 48 years old. He actually has 5 years of military service. He is a FERS employee and has 23 years already of credible service. He is married and has 2 children. So unfortunately, he severely injures his knee while playing recreational soccer. This is obviously not work-related. So he undergoes surgery, but is never able to return to full duty carrying the mail as a letter carrier. The post office, the USPS, is unable to offer an accommodation of medical restrictions. So this is a real situation here, that real possibility. So John's looking at this thinking, what do I do now? And we're going to get into that. So we can also look at another example of a federal employee. This person's name is Susan, and I want to demonstrate 2 different scenarios so we can kind of get a good picture of what a couple different things might look like. Susan is a registered nurse with the VA. She is 55 years old. She's also a FERS employee, and she has 15 years of credible service. She is married and has 1 child. Her situation is that she severely injures her lumbar spine while lifting a patient at work. So that sounds like it's work-related. She undergoes surgery and conservative treatment, but never is able to fully return back to her job in a full-duty capacity. Only able to work in a light-duty situation for 3 hours a day, and the VA is unable to accommodate. She has an ongoing federal workers' compensation claim. I want to point out there real quick that we're strong believers that that's not a long-term solution in the fact that she's unable to work. It's a temporary wage loss benefit. And we'll get into why that's not necessarily the best thing to depend on. So here's 2 great examples of federal employees, and what we're going to do is walk through their situations to see how we can protect their financial future with federal disability retirement. So let's get a baseline with what is federal disability retirement and who is eligible for it. Federal employees, FERS employees that have 18 months of service. Okay, so all FERS employees and CSRS employees are actually eligible for this benefit. FERS employees have a minimum requirement of 18 months of service. Civil Service Retirement System employees have a 5-year minimum of service requirement. There are very few civil service retirement system employees that would even be eligible for this benefit now at this point in time. So we're really talking about FERS employees here. You must have a deficiency in service in respect to your performance, attendance, or conduct. So you're not able to fully complete your job in the areas of performance, attendance, or conduct. The word disability is a tough word to use because it gets misunderstood all the time. But really, the true definition is the inability to pursue an occupation because of a physical or mental impairment. So when we use the word disability, there's a wide spectrum of what that means. But really, it's the inability to work, okay, because of a mental or physical impairment. But there is a gigantic difference between a total disability and an occupational disability. For federal disability retirement, we're really focused on the occupational disability. So we're talking about their inability to perform their job, not necessarily any job that's out there, but their job. That's really the key takeaway here, whereas a total disability might be something where you can't perform any kind of work ever again. Some workers and definitely doctors misunderstand this word disability as it pertains to this specific benefit. So it's very important to be able to articulate that to a medical professional when asking for evidence to substantiate your claim. So when we discuss medical conditions, your medical conditions do not necessarily have to be caused by your employment. Again, I'm talking about federal disability retirement here. The medical conditions, they must have arisen during your employment as a federal employee, or if you have a pre-existing condition when you were hired, the conditions would have to have worsened during your employment as a federal employee, but they don't specifically have to be caused by your employment. Some examples might be diabetes or cancer, attention deficit disorder, different things that aren't necessarily related to your specific job, but they prevent you from being fully capable of performing the job. Where does federal disability retirement come from? So this is a part of your benefit package as it is. This is something that's already built into either your FERS or SERS retirement system. It's just already there. It must be applied for and proven through an adjudication process at the Office of Personnel Management, or OPM. So it's something that already exists. It's just it's something that you have to prove and adjudicate your claim. So again, this benefit is already built into your existing retirement system, whether that's FERS or SERS, but it has to be applied for and it has to be proven through an adjudication process, and that's done through the Office of Personnel Management. So you have to prove your case through a different federal government agency in Washington, D.C., OPM. That's ultimately the agency that's going to decide if you are approved or not approved for this kind of benefit. Let's talk about how much this benefit pays if you were to be able to be approved for it. The first thing you got to understand is it's based off of a high 3 average. For those of you all who don't know what a high 3 average is, it's essentially they take a look at the 3 consecutive years that you've been a federal employee and have earned the most amount of money, and then they average that out and they come up with your high 3 average. So when we talk about how much does a federal disability retirement pay you, for the first year that you're on the benefit, after you've been approved, it's going to pay you 60% of your high 3 average, and that's going to be paid to you in monthly payments. For every other year that you remain on the benefit all the way to age 62, it's going to pay you 40% of your high 3 average, and again, those are in monthly installments. It is taxable income, so please make note of that. But you also have choices to keep your health and life insurance, which can be very, very helpful to certain situations. You also have options for a reduction in your annuity payments for a survivor spouse benefit if you should choose to do that. Again, there's different strategies there, and it's very important that you know what you're doing when you're making those choices. But here's an illustration of what it looks like to give you a better idea. Here you have what your high 3 average is, and then for that first year, again, it's 60% of your high 3 average, and then every other year, all the way to the age of 62, it's going to pay you 40% of that high 3 average. We like to think of that as a bridge to 62. So wherever you're at, if you get to a point that you can't perform your job, and your agency is not going to be able to be very helpful in terms of accommodation, this benefit will provide a bridge to the age of 62. Once you get to the age of 62, the benefit will actually recalculate into a regular retirement pension. So then the calculation for your retirement pension will be done at the age of 62 as opposed to whatever age it is that you are at that time. How long is the process? We get that question a lot because when you're trying to plan your financial future, you need to know how long things take. So you can apply for disability. One thing I really want you to understand is you can apply for disability retirement while you're still employed. We have clients all the time that are still working. Maybe you've been in limited duty capacity, sometimes even in a full duty capacity, but they're not being fully successful, obviously, but they can apply while they're still employed. Why does that matter? It matters because the application and the adjudication process is long and it's somewhat unpredictable. In order to avoid a gap in that transition between potentially employment and then disability retirement, you need to know that this could take some time. Okay, this is not something that you just push in some paperwork and it's approved in a week and then you're off and going. There is a true adjudication process. You have to prove your claim and your eligibility for this claim. And it's not necessarily short and sweet and simple. Sometimes it takes a while. So don't delay, even also if you're on workers' compensation. A lot of people make the mistake that, I'm on workers' compensation wage loss. I'm good. I'm dependent on this benefit. I'm good. I don't need to apply. Well, that benefit will eventually stop. Okay, so even if you're on that benefit, you can still apply for and receive an approval for disability retirement. Okay, we can get more into that in a different conversation, but just because you're on wage loss doesn't mean that you should not apply for disability retirement. In some situations, it can take up to 12 months for OPM to actually make their decision. Again, it's the OPM that's making this decision about whether you're going to be approved or not. It's not your employing agency. People get that confused that they think that their actual employing agency makes the decision. And that's just not the truth. It's the Office of Personnel Management, and trust me, they have a large backlog of cases that they're going through. So don't delay because it can take a while. Working in the private sector, this is something that is critically important for people, especially because remember, we're talking about proving that the federal employee has an occupational disability. If you remember me talking about that, that means that we're proving that they can't do their job, not that they can't do any job, okay? Not that they're totally disabled. We're just saying, hey, they can't do their job anymore because of these medical conditions. And because of that, the federal employee, might be able to work somewhere else in some other capacity. Well, what happens if you can? The good news about federal disability retirement is you can work in the private sector and earn an income up to 80% of your old position's current salary on top of your disability retirement payments. That is significantly important for somebody when they're thinking about what their financial future looks like. Am I going to be totally dependent upon whatever this disability retirement benefit is? Not necessarily, because there's other ways for you to go out there and earn an income in the private sector, which is not necessarily allowed with many other benefits, especially workers' compensation wage loss. You can't go do that with wage loss. They're going to offset dollar for dollar the money that you earn in the private sector with what you get from workers' compensation wage loss. That is not the case with federal disability retirement. Many of our clients actually go on to pursue another type of employment, another career path, We've had clients go into teaching and go into real estate and go into consulting and all sorts of stuff. We love hearing those stories back from clients and hearing about their new career, their new life outside of the federal government as a kind of a second career. Here's an illustration that kind of helps understand what that might look like. If you get your high 3 average here, and then for the first year, you're going to be receiving 60% of that high 3 average. Well, on top of that, you can have the earned income. And remember that's capped at 80% of your previous job's current salary. So you can earn that in addition to receiving the disability retirement. Same thing for year 2 and every other year that you're on the benefit up to age of 62. You're going to get that 40% of the high 3 average, and then in addition to that, you can earn in the private sector up to 80%. So that is very, very, very good information for somebody who is wondering, how am I going to survive in the future on a disability retirement? Is that enough money? Well, the good news is that you can, if possible, work in the private sector. Moving on to another critically important part of the puzzle when you're thinking about your financial future is to understand what happens with your pension. So you've been a federal employee, you've earned credible years of service, you're working your way towards retirement, which will all calculate into a lifetime pension. Well, then you get the detour here. You got the medical condition. You got the problem that prevents you from continuing on in that career. So you get the disability retirement. So then you get to the point of considering disability retirement, and I really want to focus on the advantage here, which is critically important. Every year that you're on disability retirement benefits, that year is going to count as an earned credible year of federal service, even though you're not even working for the federal government anymore. You're not even employed there. You're separated. But every year that you're on disability retirement, that's going to count. These years will accumulate, and they will be added to the pre-existing credible years that you already had before you got federal disability retirement. At age 62, they're all going to combine, and that's very important when considering your retirement pension and what that will look like in terms of payments to you for the rest of your life. This is very important, and I really want you to understand how big of an impact this can make to your long-term pension plan. This is one of the best parts of federal disability retirement, and I want to make sure that you understand that. So how does that translate into real numbers? Let's pull the example employee that we had talked about earlier, John, into the situation and see how that affects his retirement at age 62. So if you see here, John at age 48, when he went on disability retirement, he had 23 years of service, of credible years of service. Now, while he was on disability retirement, he was not working at the federal government. He was not employed there. He might have been working in the private sector, but he definitely was not there, and he was earning additional credible years of service. In fact, between the ages of 48 and 62, he earned an additional 14 years of credible service. That number is important because when he reaches the age of 62, it's added to the pre-existing 23 years of service that he had. So when he gets to 62 and when they compute what his regular retirement pension is going to be, they compute that based upon a 37-year service history for John versus 23 years. So that's an additional 14 years that he was able to add there. Let's take a look at why this matters and put some numbers to it to help us visually understand the impact that this can have on somebody's actual long-term retirement. Back to this situation with John, the federal employee example that we had at the beginning, is if he has an assumed high 3 average of $85,000 per year, when we take a look at his pension, if he had retired with a 23-year service history, he would have approximately $29,750 towards an annual value of what his retirement pension would be. If you look at the same thing at the age of 62, adding in the additional 14 years that he gains by being on a disability retirement, those 14 years of additional credible years of service, that will increase his annual value of his pension to be $34,850. That's a significant increase because you added 14 years of additional years of credible service that he actually wouldn't have had. That's a 17% increase, actually, by doing that. Now, that does not take into account the benefits that he actually got while he was on disability retirement. It also does not take into account the potential earnings that he could have had in the private sector during those 14 years as well. So you can see there, just pertaining to how this could increase the annual value of your pension is significant, because every year adds an additional year of service, which increases the percentage of your actual retirement whenever you reach that point. A few other things to consider when you're talking about planning with federal disability retirements is when you're on the benefit, you also have options for the continuation of certain benefits that you already have, such as health insurance, the federal employees' health benefits. You can keep your insurability there. You can keep that benefit in place. You can also keep your federal employee group life insurance, or some people call FEGLI. This is a great benefit at certain parts of your career, and if it makes sense for you, it would be optional to keep this into your retirement via disability retirement benefits. Sometimes that's great, and sometimes it's not so great, but it's worth knowing that you can actually keep that. You also have other options in terms of survivor benefits, very similar to the options that you would have at regular retirement age. You can choose a reduced or a reduction in your annuity for a surviving spouse benefit. Now, there are a couple options there, and they will be very specific to your situation, which is why proper planning here is essential. You want to make sure that you get the right benefits in place and the continuation of the benefits in place in order to maximize what that retirement can look like. It's also important to keep in mind that when you get approved for federal disability retirement, you will then have a very limited time frame in order to change these elections. So again, proper planning is essential. Let's actually take a deeper dive into what that looks like. With regards to the federal employee health benefit, when you're thinking about continuing that into retirement, first thing to reiterate is that it can be done. It can be carried into retirement. The USPS employees, they do lose their bonus. There's an approximate 5% change, and they actually revert back to standard FERS rates. So you lose the bonus that you get, but you can keep it with when you're a USPS employee. The spouse and the family, now they can remain during the annuitant's life, so they can remain in those benefits can remain intact while the annuitant is still alive. The spouse can remain on as a survivor if the survivor annuity was elected. Okay, that's very important when you try to piece together what you and your spouse might need in the future in regards to health benefits, because it might be worth choosing some sort of a survivor annuity option just for the sake of continuing the health benefits, like in a scenario where that's very important to you. Now, looking at federal employee group life insurance, a couple things to remember about this is that this is a guaranteed issue group policy. That's important because you don't have to prove insurability here. It's a guaranteed issue plan, and that might be important to you if you don't feel that you might be insurable in the private sector. Annually renewable term insurance, though this is not whole life insurance, this is not variable life insurance, this is term insurance. The rates do increase biannually. And again, this can be carried into your retirement. This is one of the largest insurance groups that exists. I think it might be the largest group that exists, and it's run by Metropolitan Life Insurance. There are 4 different options of life insurance here. A lot of you already all know this. but there's the basic option. There's option A, B, and C. How that pertains to being carried into retirement, again, the answer is yes, you can keep it. It is often very overpriced for people that are over the age of 45 years old. It might be worth the higher price, again, if you're uninsurable in the private sector. These are things that you need to consider. It can always be reduced over time, but it cannot be increased. So the amount of insurance that you choose is very important if you plan on it being the only form of life insurance that you have. Premiums, they do continue to rise, and like I said before, they just continuously get to the point of not realistic for most people, depending upon the options that they've chosen. Reduction in face value can be elected to offset the rise in premiums. That's a possibility. But ultimately, a piece of advice is I would always consider private life insurance options. There are also guaranteed issue policies in the private market as well. So I think it's worth looking at some point in time in your journey when you're looking at what your picture will look like in the future. Let's also talk about survivor benefits in a little bit more detail. Again, this is a big topic and sometimes confusing, but I will say it's also very specific to your situation. There could be some real benefit adds here for you and not so much for somebody else. So the essential thing that I want you to take away is what are the options and kind of what does that mean? The first option is a 10% reduction of your federal disability retirement payments or annuity, okay? That is a 10% reduction in exchange for 50% of an annuity left to your spouse if you were to pass away before your spouse. The other option is a slightly less reduction, but less of the annuity left to your spouse. It's 5% reduction and 25% of your annuity left to your spouse. Now, remember, a surviving spouse is not allowed to remain on your federal employee health benefit plan unless the employee elected survivor benefits. So if you never chose survivor benefits and then you were to pass away, after that time, your spouse would not be allowed to be on federal employee health benefits. As opposed to if you did choose survivor benefit options, they could. So that might be really important to you and your spouse, and that really comes down to kind of what your situation is. Another really important thing to remember here is that a survivor annuity can only be left to a spouse. So what I mean by that is if your spouse were to pass away before you, then there would be no annuity left to anybody because you have outlived your spouse at that point in time. So this doesn't quite work the same way that life insurance does, in the sense that life insurance, you can have multiple beneficiaries if you were to pass away. So some people treat it like life insurance, and sometimes that's appropriate because of other reasons, but it's not a true comparable to life insurance itself. If you think about it that way, then it's very expensive compared to private life insurance options, again, that have many more beneficiary options. No refund if the annuitant survives their spouse. No refund if you survive your spouse. Okay, cost of living adjustments or COLAs. We like to explain what this means and how it affects a person that is on federal disability retirement versus a regular retiree. Regular retirees, non-disabled FERS employees that retire, they actually do not begin to receive COLAs until the age of 62. An example of that would be if a person took a regular retirement at age 55, they would not actually start receiving any COLA adjustments until the age of 62. That's not the case for people who are on federal disability retirement. Federal disability retirement annuitants, they actually start receiving COLA adjustments only 1 year after they start receiving the benefit. So somebody that is, for an example, age 42 and they get approved at the age of 42 for disability retirement, they will actually start receiving their COLAs at age 43 rather than waiting all the way to age 62. That can make a big impact on your future in your financial plan. Now, last but not least, I want to touch real quick on the Thrift Savings Plan, the TSP. You must strategize the timing of your contributions into the TSP to maximize that benefit. What I mean by that is the employer's contribution is very, very important. It's an important part of this. If you have taken advantage of that, it's essentially free money towards this plan. You can leave your money in the TSP after retirement, but you're not required to. Some people don't like to do that. They don't feel comfortable with it. They want to roll it out into a more traditional retirement account, and that's absolutely okay. It's definitely different than traditional retirement accounts because of the limited options in funds and investments that you have inside the TSP versus the traditional methods of retirement accounts. So, I think there's equal arguments to kind of both here. It really, again, depends upon your very specific situation, your risk tolerance, and kind of how your comfort level if you've already left the federal government and leaving your money in the TSP. But remember that there is no employer match in retirement. So you don't get the same added benefit that you did the entire time that you were a federal employee in regards to the employer's match. Okay? So when you're on disability retirement or even in regular retirement, you do not get the employer match any longer. So it might really be worth considering a possibility of transitioning some funds out of there. All right, so to wrap things up here, I just want to reiterate how important it is to understand what options are out there, and especially with federal disability retirement. If that is an option for you, perhaps it can really provide some protection for you in the future in regards to your retirement, and it can shed some hope maybe for what that might look like for you. So know your rights, know your options. I seriously suggest that you seek professional assistance, whether that's a law firm that can help you through that process or some financial professional that can help you understand more of those related parts of it. But you ultimately need to develop a strategy and know what you've got and know where you're heading. And we hope that this presentation was able to do some of that for you today. Well, that wraps up my presentation here today. Thank you for being here. Greatly appreciate your time here with us today. I'm going to turn it back over to Nick Child for some final remarks.
Thank you, Bo, for leading us through that. I hope everyone here can see how federal disability retirement is a really great option for you if you have a disability or injury, and how that can protect you long term into your future. I think the current situation in the world is a perfect example of what it can look like during uncertain times, and having something like federal disability retirement there to consistently give you income and help you get through life is a great option. With that, we're going to leave the chat open for about 15 more minutes to answer any questions you might have. If you have a question or two that goes longer than that, feel free to give us a call or get on our website and ask a question, and we'll be happy to get on there with you and schedule a consultation with one of our experts here. Really thankful to have you here. Really appreciate you taking the time. We're going to keep doing more of these webinars in the future, so always look at our webinar schedule on our website. Hoping to put it together a new one next month, specific to the current financial situation happening with the markets and around the coronavirus and all of that. So look out for that. And with that, we're going to wrap up this webinar and leave it open for a little bit to answer any questions. So we hope to see you next time. Thanks for being here.